The conference hall on Geneva Station hung suspended in the void between Earth and Luna, a gleaming monument to human ambition and, more importantly, human hope. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the reinforced viewport, watching Earth turn slowly below, its familiar blue and white marble appearance filling her with a complex mixture of pride and exhaustion. Behind her, the final preparations were underway. Technicians ran diagnostic checks on translation systems. Security personnel, a carefully balanced mix of European Federation Guards and North American Alliance Marines, positioned themselves at strategic intervals. Diplomatic attachés whispered into comm units, confirming schedules and reviewing last-minute position papers. Today marked the culmination of 18 months of painstaking negotiation. Today, humanity would finally end the resource wars that had claimed 12 million lives over the past decade. Ambassador Vasquez? The voice belonged to General Marcus Chen, head of the Joint Military Security Detail. He approached with the measured stride of a career soldier, his gray temples lending authority to features otherwise youthful for his 52 years. Final security sweep is complete. The delegations from the African Coalition and the Pacific Rim Confederation are docking now. The European Federation representatives arrived an hour ago.
Elena turned from the viewport. And the North American Alliance?
President Morrison's shuttle is 15 minutes out. Chen paused, and something flickered across his expression, a hesitation that made Elena's stomach tighten. There's something else.
Tell me.
Deep space tracking picked up an anomaly approximately 40 minutes ago. Multiple contacts, moving at speeds our sensors have difficulty calculating. They're decelerating as they approach the inner system.
Elena felt the blood drain from her face. How many contacts?
17 confirmed. Possibly more. For a moment, neither spoke. The implications hung between them like a physical weight. Humanity had known they were not alone in the universe for exactly 112 years, ever since the Mendez expedition had discovered the ruins on Kepler 442b. Ancient structures, clearly artificial, clearly not human. The civilization that had built them, whoever or whatever they had been, was long dead, their cities reduced to crumbling monuments on a world where the atmosphere had long since bled away into space. But ruins proved that intelligent life existed elsewhere, and if one civilization had risen, others surely had as well. What humanity had never found was proof that any of those civilizations still existed. Until now. Have they made any attempt at communication? Elena asked. None. They're simply. Elena closed her eyes, drawing on reserves of calm she had cultivated over 30 years in diplomatic service. Continue monitoring. But General, this peace conference cannot be delayed. Whatever is coming, humanity needs to face it united, not fractured by war.
Chen nodded slowly. Agreed. But, Ambassador, if this turns hostile,
then we'll deal with it. But not before we absolutely must. She straightened her ceremonial jacket, fingers briefly touching the metal pinned about her heart. The Order of Diplomatic Merit, awarded for her work in brokering the Johannesburg ceasefire 3 years prior. The delegations are arriving. Let's not keep history waiting. The main conference chamber was a masterpiece of neutral design. A circular table, crafted from lunar regolith and terrestrial oak in symbolic combination, dominated the center of the room. Around it sat the representatives of humanity's 4 major power blocks, each delegation carefully positioned equidistant from the others. President James Morrison of the North American Alliance sat flanked by advisors, his famous silver-white hair immaculately styled, his expression carefully composed. Across from him, Chancellor Yuki Tanaka of the Pacific Rim Confederation maintained the inscrutable composure that had made her legendary in diplomatic circles. Premier Olusegun Adeyemi of the African Coalition sat with his hands folded, radiating patient authority. And High Representative Johann Muller of the European Federation completed the quartet, his thin lips pressed into what might have been either anticipation or concern. Elena stood at a podium positioned between the table and the viewport, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement system.
Distinguished leaders and representatives, we gather today to close a chapter of human history marked by tragedy and loss. The resource wars have pested our species as few conflicts have before, but they have also demonstrated something profound, that even in our darkest moments, humanity possesses the capacity to step back from the abyss and choose peace.
She paused, allowing her words to settle over the assembled dignitaries. The treaty before you represents 18 months of negotiation, countless compromises, and the sincere efforts of thousands of dedicated individuals across all 4 blocks. It is not perfect, no peace ever is, but it offers something precious, a path forward where our children need not inherit our hatred.
Chancellor Tanaka spoke first, her voice clear and measured. The Pacific Rim Confederation has reviewed the final terms. We find them acceptable. We are prepared to sign.
As is the African Coalition, Premier Adeyemi added, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. Our people have suffered enough. It is time for healing. High Representative Mueller nodded. The European Federation concurs. Let us end this.
All eyes turned to President Morrison. He sat motionless for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some middle distance only he could see. Then, slowly, he drew a breath.
The North American alliance has been the most reluctant party to these negotiations, he admitted. Our losses were significant. There are those among my people who believe peace comes too cheaply, that we surrender too much. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had softened. But I am not among them. I have seen the cost of war. I will not ask another generation to pay it.
He reached for his stylus, and Elena felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. 18 months of work. 18 months of setbacks and breakthroughs, of moments when everything had seemed hopeless, and moments when peace had finally seemed within reach.
And now, the station shuddered. It was subtle at first. A vibration felt more than heard, a tremor that passed through the deck plates like a whisper of something vast moving nearby. Then alarms began to sound, their piercing tones cutting through the solemn atmosphere like a blade through silk.
"General Chen," Elena shouted into her comm unit. "Report."
Static crackled for a moment before Chen's voice came through, strained but controlled. Ambassador, the contacts have arrived at our position. They're surrounding the station. We're reading 17 vessels, each approximately 2 kilometers in length. They're... Ambassador, I've never seen anything like this.
Have they communicated?
They are doing so now, broadcasting on all frequencies. Translating. A pause, then Chen's voice returned, flat with disbelief. They're ordering us to surrender the station. They claim this system, all inhabited bodies and the resources therein, by right of the dominion of the Vrectal Ascendancy. Any resistance will be... Their word translates roughly as purged.
Elena's mind raced. Around her, the chamber had erupted into chaos. Advisors shouting, security personnel drawing weapons, leaders demanding explanations. But through it all, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity.
This was exactly the wrong moment.
Of all the moments in human history, these aliens had chosen to arrive at the one moment when humanity stood united, not yet divided again by the resumption of peace, but not yet torn by the continuation of war. 4 military powers, their forces still mobilized, their weapons still armed, their soldiers still ready. If the Vrectal Ascendancy had arrived a month later, they would have found humanity demilitarizing, standing down, turning their attention inward. If they had arrived a month earlier, they would have found humanity exhausted by conflict, resources depleted, attention scattered. But they had arrived now.
"Get me an open channel to those ships," Elena ordered.
Ambassador. Now, General. A moment later, Chen confirmed the connection. Elena stepped forward, facing the viewport, where, beyond the station's hull, the alien vessels presumably lurked, too distant to see with the naked eye, but present nonetheless.
This is Ambassador Elena Vasquez, representing the unified nations of Earth. You have interrupted a diplomatic conference of historic importance. We do not recognize your claim to our system, our world, or our species. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences of your aggression.
The response came not through audio, but through the station itself. Every display screen, every holographic projector, every surface capable of showing an image suddenly flickered and activated, and on each one, the same face appeared.
It was not a face in the human sense. The being was clearly evolved from something like an insect. Compound eyes that gleamed with iridescent darkness, mandibles that clicked in complex patterns, antennae that twitched as if tasting the very air. Its body, visible behind the close-up of its face, was armored in what might have been either natural chitin or artificial enhancement.
You are amusing, small creature, the Vrektal said, its voice rendered into English by translation software that gave it an eerily melodic quality. We have studied your species for some time. We have watched your petty wars, your primitive posturing. You fight over scraps of territory on a single world while the galaxy awaits.
Then you know we're capable of defending ourselves, Elena replied.
The Vrektal made a sound that might have been laughter. We know you are capable of killing each other with enthusiasm and efficiency. This is why we have come. Species such as yours, aggressive, territorial, short-sighted, cannot be permitted to spread beyond your origin world. You will be contained. Your technology will be catalogued and, if useful, appropriated. Your population will be reduced to manageable levels and assigned to labor tasks befitting your cognitive abilities. President Morrison had risen from his seat and now stood beside Elena. You think you can enslave humanity?
Enslave? The Vrektal's mandibles clicked in what seemed to be amusement. Such a primitive concept. No, we will domesticate you, as you have done to the lesser creatures of your world. In time, you will come to appreciate the simplicity of existence without the burden of self-determination.
That, Chancellor Tanaka said, stepping forward to join them, will not happen.
You believe you have a choice.
The Vrektal leaned closer to whatever camera was transmitting its image. You do not. Our vessels are capable of rendering your world uninhabitable within hours. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your ships cannot match our speed or maneuverability. We offer you subjugation as mercy. The alternative is extinction. Elena looked at the faces around her. Morrison, Tanaka, Adeyemi, Mueller, and the dozens of advisors and guards who filled the chamber. In their eyes, she saw fear, but she also saw something else, something that had been temporarily obscured by the resource wars, but had never truly disappeared.
Defiance. I wonder, Elena said, turning back to the screen, if you've ever studied human history in depth. Our entire species' story is one of facing impossible odds and refusing to surrender. Empires have risen and fallen. Tyrants have promised eternal dominion and crumbled to dust. And through it all, humanity has endured.
Rhetoric, the Vrektal dismissed. We have heard such words from 1,000 species before you. They all fell.
Maybe, but none of them were us.
The attack began 12 minutes later. The Vrektal did not aim for Earth, not yet. Their strategy, General Chen would later explain, was to establish complete orbital supremacy before moving against planetary targets. Standard doctrine, apparently, for a species that had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy.
They destroyed the communications array first, a precise strike that severed Geneva Station's connection to Earth's defense networks. Then they methodically eliminated the orbital defense platforms,
ancient weapon systems that had been built during the early days of space colonization and never significantly upgraded.
The platforms fought. Their crews, men and women who had signed up for what they thought would be peaceful postings in a system at war only with itself, died fighting, but they died nonetheless.
In the conference chamber, Elena and the assembled leaders watched the destruction through viewports that should have shown empty space, but now displayed the flowering explosions of human vessels and installations.
"How many ships do we have?" Premier Adeyemi asked, his voice tight.
In system? Approximately 400 combat-capable vessels, General Chen replied. But they're scattered, some in Mars orbit, some in the belt, some here at Luna.
And Earth's surface defenses? Significant, but designed for orbital bombardment scenarios. They won't stop a concentrated assault by vessels of this capability. Chancellor Tanaka studied the tactical display that one of her aides had activated. If they're targeting infrastructure first, we have time. Not much, but some.
Time for what? High Representative Mueller demanded.
To coordinate, President Morrison said. He had pulled off his ceremonial jacket, and his shirt underneath was already stained with sweat. But his eyes were clear, his voice steady. We have 4 separate military commands, 4 separate fleets, 4 separate strategic doctrines. That ends now. The leaders looked at each other. 18 months of negotiations had brought them to the brink of peace, but not yet across it. The treaty remained unsigned. Technically, they were still at war with each other.
But the war was over. In the face of extinction, the resource wars became as meaningless as a children's quarrel.
Unified command, Chancellor Tanaka said. Under whom?
Does it matter? Premier Adeyemi asked.
We fight together or we die separately.
It matters, Mueller insisted. Chain of command must be clear.
Elena stepped forward. Then let me suggest something. All 4 of you share command. Decisions made jointly, by consensus where possible, by majority where necessary. No single leader. No accusations of favoritism or power grabs.
And if we disagree? Morrison asked.
Then you work it out. Quickly. Because those, she pointed at the viewport, where another explosion marked another human death, won't wait for you to finish arguing. The 4 leaders exchanged glances. Then, almost simultaneously, they nodded.
Get me a secure connection to my defense ministry, Chancellor Tanaka ordered.
And mine, the others echoed.
For the next several hours, as the Vrectals systematically eliminated humanity's orbital infrastructure, the leaders of Earth's 4 power blocks coordinated as they never had before. Fleets that had been preparing to fight each other were redirected to fighting positions. Weapon systems that had been developed in secret were revealed and shared. Strategic plans that had been guarded as the most sensitive of state secrets were laid bare for all to see. And humanity prepared to fight. The first coordinated counterattack came 17 hours after the Vrectal arrival. It was not a major offensive. Humanity did not yet have the ships in position for that, but it was a statement, a declaration. We will not go quietly. The attack targeted the smallest of the Vrectal vessels, a ship that had separated from the main formation to pursue a fleeing civilian transport. 64 human warships converged on its position from 3 different vectors: North American cruisers, Pacific Rim destroyers, African coalition frigates, and European Federation corvettes. They came out of the shadow of Luna, using the moon's mass to conceal their approach until the last possible moment. The Vrectal ship detected them, of course. Its sensors were far superior to anything humanity possessed. It turned to face the incoming threat, shield generators humming, weapons charging. What it didn't expect was the nature of the attack. Human missiles streaked across the void, not nuclear weapons or plasma charges, but simple kinetic impactors. Lumps of iron accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. Primitive, crude. The Vrectile shields deflected them easily. But the missiles weren't the attack. The missiles were the distraction. While the Vrectal vessel focused on the incoming ordnance,
A single human shuttle, its signature masked by the chaos of the missile barrage, slipped past its shields. The shuttle carried no weapons in the conventional sense. It carried people.
Marines, 12 of them, 6 North American, 6 Pacific Rim. They had trained together exactly once in a hastily arranged session in Geneva Station's cargo bay. They spoke different languages, followed different doctrines, and had been prepared to kill each other just days before.
Now they moved as one. The shuttle breached the Vrectal hull through what they hoped was an airlock. It was, but not the kind they expected. Vrectal airlocks operated on entirely different principles than human ones. 3 Marines died in the first 30 seconds, their bodies torn apart by decompression differentials their suits weren't designed to handle.
The remaining 9 pressed forward. The interior of the Vrectal vessel was a maze of organic curves and bioluminescent lighting. The air was wrong, too thick, too humid, filled with chemical traces that made the Marines' eyes water, even through their sealed helmets. The gravity was too heavy by a factor of nearly 2, making every step an exhausting labor.
But humans had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They had survived ice ages and plagues, predators, and each other. 9 Marines in an alien environment with failing equipment and no backup were not an unfamiliar scenario in the long story of human warfare.
They were outnumbered, outgunned, and on hostile ground. They didn't care.
The Marines fought their way to what their limited intelligence suggested was the engine room. They fought with rifles when they had ammunition, with knives when they didn't, and with bare hands when nothing else remained. Vrectal warriors fell before them, insectoid bodies designed for speed and precision, but unprepared for the savage fury of cornered humans.
1 Marine reached the engine core. Private First Class Maria Santos, Pacific Rim Confederation Marine Corps. She had a husband on Earth, 3 children she hadn't seen in 2 years of war. She had a bomb strapped to her back. The last transmission from the shuttle came 11 minutes after the breach. Engine core located. Charges set. Detonating in 5. Tell my kids.
The line went dead. So did the Vrectal ship.
The destruction of a single scout vessel was, in military terms, insignificant. The Vrectal fleet still numbered 16 capital ships, each one capable of devastating a continent. Their commander, the insectoid being who had addressed humanity with such contempt, did not even acknowledge the loss.
But something had changed. In the command center that had been hastily established aboard Geneva Station, the 4 leaders watched the tactical display as the Vrectal ship's signature vanished. For a long moment, no one spoke.
Then Premier Adeyemi said quietly, "So they can be killed."
At terrible cost, Chancellor Tanaka replied.
But killed nonetheless. President Morrison leaned forward, studying the display. They expected this to be easy. They expected us to surrender or die quickly. They weren't prepared for this.
1 ship, High Representative Mueller cautioned. We have killed 1 ship and lost 64 of our own doing it. The mathematics are not favorable.
The mathematics rarely are, Elena said. She had remained in the command center despite being a diplomat, not a military officer. The leaders had not asked her to leave. But mathematics have never been humanity's primary weapon.
Then what is? Mueller asked.
Elena looked at the display, at the markers representing human vessels gathering from across the system, converging into formations that would have been unthinkable a day ago. Spite, she said. We are too stubborn to die when we're supposed to. Over the next 72 hours, the battle for the Sol system unfolded in a series of desperate engagements. The Vrectal had expected a quick conquest. They had studied humanity, yes, but their studies had focused on technology, resources, and population, the measurable factors that their strategic algorithms used to calculate conquest probability. By every metric that mattered to them, humans were a minor species on the cusp of reaching the stars, easily subdued before they could become a threat. What they had not calculated was the unquantifiable factor: human stubbornness. When the Vrektal destroyed the shipyards at Mars, the workers who survived the initial bombardment jury-rigged weapons from construction equipment and fought back. When they targeted the mining stations in the belt, the miners crashed their ships into the attacking vessels, turning themselves into kamikaze projectiles.
When they attempted to land occupation forces on Luna, the colonists collapsed the tunnels around them, burying thousands of Vrektal warriors and themselves under millions of tons of lunar regolith.
Each act of resistance was futile in isolation. Each one cost human lives that couldn't be replaced. But each one also cost the Vrektal time they hadn't planned for, time they couldn't afford.
Because humanity was not fighting to win. Not yet. Humanity was fighting to buy time.
Time for the fleet to gather. Time for the weapons to be deployed. Time for the plan to come together. The plan, such as it was, had been conceived in the first hours after the Vrektal arrival. It had been refined by strategists from all 4 blocks, working together in ways that would have been unthinkable before the invasion. It was insane by any conventional measure.
It was also the only chance humanity had.
The Vrektal shields were, as far as anyone could determine, impenetrable to human weapons. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, nuclear explosions, nothing humanity could throw at them could breach those shimmering barriers of force. But the shields had one limitation. They were not airtight.
The Vrektal vessels required atmosphere. Their crews needed to breathe, just as humans did. And while the shields could block solid objects and coherent energy, they could not block gases.
Humanity had spent decades developing chemical and biological weapons. The resource wars had seen some of them deployed, to humanity's eternal shame. They were banned now, their use considered an ultimate taboo.
But taboos meant nothing when facing extinction.
Scientists from all 4 blocks worked together, combining their knowledge in ways that peacetime cooperation could never have achieved. They designed a compound specifically tailored to Vrektal biology, a nerve agent that would pass through their shields as harmless vapor, then bind to receptors in the insectoid nervous system and shut down motor function within seconds.
The delivery system was equally innovative. Thousands of small drones, each carrying a payload of the compound, would approach the Vrektal fleet from all directions simultaneously. Most would be destroyed by point defense systems, but enough would get through. They hoped. The drones were manufactured in factories across the system, factories that had been building weapons for the resource wars and now built them for a very different conflict. Production schedules that would normally take months were compressed into days. Workers collapsed at their stations and were replaced by others who worked until they collapsed in turn.
And while the drones were built, the fleet bought time.
Captain Yusuf Okafor of the African Coalition battleship Mandela had been preparing to fight the Pacific Rim Confederation when the Vrektal arrived. His ship was outdated, its systems patched together from components manufactured across 3 different decades, its crew exhausted from months of skirmishing along the Mars Belt frontier. Now he found himself in formation with ships he had expected to destroy, following orders from a unified command that still felt surreal, preparing for an engagement that would determine the fate of his species.
All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. The voice came through the fleet-wide channel, calm and measured despite the circumstances. The drone swarm will launch in 30 minutes. Our job is to ensure the Vrektal are focused on us when it happens. Every ship they're tracking, every weapon they're monitoring, is a drone they're not shooting down.
Okafor studied the tactical display. The Vrektal fleet had established a defensive perimeter around Earth. Their 17 ships, 16 now, he corrected himself, remembering the Marine sacrifice, positioned to intercept any approach to the planet. From that position, they had begun systematically bombarding surface installations, military bases, industrial centers, population centers.
Billions of lives hung in the balance. Captain, his first officer, Commander Abeni Adeyemi, no relation to the Premier despite the shared surname, stood at his shoulder. The crew is ready.
Are they? Okafor asked quietly.
They're scared,
But they're angry too. Those monsters killed Captain Chen's wife and children. Lieutenant Okonkwo lost his entire extended family in the Lagos bombardment. Everyone has lost someone.
Okafor nodded slowly. Anger is good. It keeps you moving. But make sure they don't get sloppy. We need to survive long enough to matter.
The fleet began its approach. 400 human vessels against 16 Vrektal dreadnoughts. It should have been a slaughter, and in terms of raw casualties, it would be. But the humans weren't trying to win this engagement. They were trying to distract.
The battle was chaos.
The Vrektal weapons were devastating. Beams of coherent energy that sliced through human vessels like a torch through paper. The Mandela lost its starboard weapons array in the first 30 seconds, vaporized by a glancing hit that would have destroyed the entire ship if aimed more precisely. 3 vessels in Okafor's immediate formation simply ceased to exist, their crews given no time even to scream.
But the humans pressed forward.
They used the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover. They coordinated their fire, concentrating their attacks on single targets to create sensor overload, even if they couldn't penetrate shields. They launched decoys and false signatures, making the Vrektal targeting systems work for every hit.
And they died. In ones and twos and dozens, human ships died. But they kept coming.
Drone swarm launching now, Admiral Chen's voice announced. All vessels provide maximum distraction. Okafor watched the tactical display as thousands of tiny signatures appeared at the edges of the system. Drones, so small as to be nearly invisible, accelerating toward the Vrektal fleet. The enemy would detect them eventually. They would begin destroying them with point defense systems optimized to handle exactly this kind of swarm attack.
But while they did that, they wouldn't be firing at human ships. All forward weapons, target the lead vessel, Okafor ordered. Everything we have.
The Mandela's remaining batteries opened up, pouring fire into shields that shrugged it off without visible effect. It was a futile gesture in terms of actual damage, but every joule of energy the Vrektal shields absorbed was a joule their sensors were processing, a joule their point defense systems weren't using against the drones.
The battle became a race against time. Human ships died by the score. The Mandela took hit after hit, systems failing across the ship, crew members dying at their stations. Okafor himself was wounded when an explosion on the bridge sent shrapnel through his left arm, but he refused to leave his command chair.
The drones closed in. Vrektal point defense systems began tracking and destroying them, but there were so many, coming from so many directions. For every 10 destroyed, 1 slipped through, and 1 was enough.
The first Vrektal ship to feel the effects was the command vessel, the one that had carried the insectoid leader who had so confidently pronounced humanity's doom. Its shields were intact, its weapons were still firing, but inside, something was very wrong.
The nerve agent worked faster than the human scientists had dared hope. Within seconds of penetrating the vessel's atmosphere, Vrektal crew members began to collapse. Their nervous systems, so precisely adapted over millions of years of evolution, had no defense against a compound designed specifically to destroy them. The command vessel's weapons fell silent. Its engines flickered and died. It began to drift, a dead hulk crewed by corpses. Then the second vessel went silent, and the third, and the fourth. The remaining Vrektal ships broke formation, scattering in all directions as they realized what was happening. But the drones pursued them, relentless, tireless, their payloads seeking the vulnerable atmosphere within those impenetrable shields.
One by one, the Vrektal vessels fell silent.
And then it was over. The aftermath was, in some ways, more difficult than the battle itself. Humanity had won, but at a cost that defied comprehension. 30 billion people had lived on Earth and its colonies before the Vrektal attack. The bombardment of Earth's surface had killed nearly 2 billion in the first 3 days alone. Space installations had lost millions more. The battle itself had claimed over 40,000 service members. The scars would take generations to heal. But humanity was alive,
And for the first time in their history, they were truly united. The peace treaty that had been interrupted by the Vrektal was signed aboard Geneva Station 6 days after the final alien vessel fell silent. The ceremony was brief. None of the leaders had patience for lengthy speeches after what they had witnessed. But the signing itself carried a weight that no words could have provided.
Elena Vasquez watched from the side of the chamber as the 4 styluses touched the document, making it official. The resource wars were over. Humanity was at peace. "Do you think it will last?" General Chen asked quietly. He stood beside her, his arm in a sling from wounds suffered during the battle.
The peace or the unity?
Both.
Elena considered the question. I think we've learned something. Something we should have known all along, but needed to be reminded of in the most brutal way possible.
What's that?
That our differences are small compared to what we share. That the universe is vast and hostile, and we're all we have. She paused, watching as the leaders rose from the signing table, their expressions a complex mixture of exhaustion and relief. I don't think we'll forget that lesson easily.
The Vrektal might not have been alone, Chen said. There might be others out there, other civilizations that see us as prey.
Then they'll learn the same lesson. Elena's voice hardened. You don't interrupt humanity's peace talks. You don't threaten our world. You don't try to enslave our species.
And if you do?
Elena turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw something that he would remember for the rest of his life, a fierce, proud light that was as old as humanity itself.
Then you pay the full price.
The memorial stood in the center of what had once been Central Park, now renamed Unity Park in honor of the alliance that had saved humanity. It was a simple structure, a wall of polished obsidian, inscribed with the names of everyone who had died in what historians were already calling the First Galactic War.
There were many names, too many to read in a single day. Elena Vasquez came here often. She had not sought re-election to her ambassadorial position. Younger diplomats were needed now, people who could help build the new unified human government that was slowly taking shape. But she remained active as an advisor, a voice of experience in a world that was changing faster than anyone could have imagined.
Today, she stood before the section of the wall dedicated to the Marines who had died aboard the first Vrektal vessel destroyed by human hands. 12 names, 12 lives given so that billions might survive.
Maria Santos, she read aloud, Private First Class, Pacific Rim Confederation Marine Corps. Detonated charges that destroyed Vrektal Scout Vessel 7. Survived by husband Carlos and children Isabella, Mateo, and Sofia. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn. I've read her file, President Morrison said. He was no longer president. That title had been retired along with the North American Alliance itself, folded into the new United Earth government. But old habits died hard, and people still addressed him with the honorific. She was going to muster out after the resource wars, take her discharge bonus, buy a little farm somewhere, watch her kids grow up.
Instead, she gave everything to save a species that had been too busy killing itself to notice the real threats out there.
Yes. Morrison fell silent for a moment. We're receiving transmissions from the Vrektal homeworld. They've sued for peace. Apparently, they're part of a larger empire, the ascendancy they mentioned, and news of what happened here has spread. The other species are unsettled.
Good. Morrison raised an eyebrow. Good that they're unsettled.
Good that they know what happens when you attack Earth. Elena finally turned to face him. We were caught off guard once. We won't be again. But deterrence only works if your enemies believe you're capable of carrying out your threats.
We've begun construction on the new defense grid, mixed human and captured Vrektal technology. The engineers are saying we'll have weapons that can actually penetrate their shields within 5 years.
That's not enough. Shields can be improved. Weapons can be countered. What we need is something they can't match, something they can't predict.
And what's that?
Elena looked back at the wall.
at the names of the dead, at the monument to humanity's sacrifice and triumph. Us, she said. Our adaptability, our stubbornness, our refusal to die when we're supposed to. That's what they couldn't calculate, and that's what will keep them afraid.
Morrison nodded slowly. The Vrectal ambassador is requesting a meeting. They want to discuss terms.
I'm sure they do. What are you going to tell them?
That depends. What would you advise? Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Listen to them, hear their offers, and then make it absolutely clear that humanity remembers what they tried to do. We may make peace with them. We may even become allies in time, but we will never forget, and we will never be caught unprepared again.
That's a hard stance.
It's the only stance. The galaxy is watching us now. The Vrectal weren't the only predators out there. If we show weakness, others will come. But if we show strength, if we make it clear that attacking humanity means facing consequences beyond their calculations, then maybe, just maybe, we'll be left alone long enough to become too powerful to threaten. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, contemplating her words. Finally, he nodded. I'll convey your advice to the council.
Do that. Elena turned back to the memorial. And tell them one more thing.
What?
Tell them that Maria Santos and the other Marines didn't die so we could cower before the next alien fleet that shows up. They died so we could stand tall, so we could look any species in the galaxy in the eye and say, try us, see what happens.
And if they do try us?
Elena's eyes hardened. Then they'll pay the full price, just like the Vrectal did. The transmission went out across all frequencies, broadcast toward the stars in every direction. It was humanity's first official communication to the wider galaxy. Not a plea for peace, not an offer of friendship, but a simple statement of fact. This is the United Earth Government, speaking on behalf of the human species. 1 year ago, the Vrectal Ascendancy attempted to subjugate our world. They failed. Their fleet was destroyed, their warriors killed, their ambitions shattered against our resistance. We do not seek conflict with the civilizations of the galaxy. We are a young species, still learning our place among the stars. We would welcome friendship, trade, the sharing of knowledge. But let any who would threaten us understand this. Humanity has fought wars since before recorded history. We have survived disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. We have built civilizations, torn them down, and built them again. We are not easily conquered, and we do not surrender. If you come in peace, we will welcome you. If you come in war, you will be destroyed. This is not a threat. This is a promise. On 100 worlds across the galaxy, beings of 1,000 different species watched the transmission. Some laughed at human arrogance, some trembled at human ferocity. Some calculated the odds of conquest and found them less favorable than expected. And in the command centers of a dozen star-faring civilizations, strategists updated their files on the species known as human, and marked them as a threat to be monitored carefully. Because the galaxy had learned something about humanity that day, something that would shape interstellar politics for centuries to come. Humans were dangerous. Not because of their technology, which was primitive. Not because of their numbers, which were small. Not because of their territory, which was limited to a single system. But because when humanity was pushed, when humanity was threatened, when humanity was given every reason to surrender and die, humanity pushed back. Humanity fought. Humanity found ways to win that their enemies could not predict or prevent. The Vrectal had interrupted human peace talks, expecting easy conquest. They had paid the full price, and the galaxy would not soon forget it. Authors afterward. The story of the Vrectal invasion became humanity's defining myth in the centuries that followed. It was told and retold, embellished and analyzed, celebrated and mourned.
Every year on the anniversary of the battle, humans across the galaxy paused to remember those who had fallen and those who had fought.
But perhaps more importantly, the story became a warning to anyone who might think to repeat the Vrektal's mistake.
The galaxy learned, slowly and sometimes painfully, that humans were not to be trifled with. Other species had tried, of course. There were always those who thought they could succeed where the Vektal had failed, who convinced themselves that human victories were flukes or exaggerations.
They learned. Humanity expanded across the stars, colonizing worlds, building alliances, becoming a power that even the oldest civilizations had to respect. They never became tyrants, that was not in their nature, but they never allowed themselves to be victimized either.
And whenever a new species made first contact, whenever alien ambassadors arrived at human space seeking diplomatic relations, they were taken to the memorial in Unity Park. They were shown the wall of names, millions of them now, from conflicts across the centuries. They were told the story of the Vrektal invasion.
And they were given the same message that had been broadcast to the stars so long ago.
Come in peace, and we will welcome you. Come in war, and you will be destroyed.
It was perhaps a harsh way to begin a relationship. Some species were offended by it. Others found it needlessly aggressive.
But none of them ever forgot.
And that, in the end, was the point.
The end.